Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Why the Mississippi Miracle Wasn't a Miracle, the Science, Data, and Change That Led to Literacy Transformation. My name is Victoria, and I'm a marketing manager here at Amplify. Today's webinar will be recorded, and we're going to email out that recording link for you to rewatch as you'd like. And everyone here with us today will also receive a certificate of attendance. We have a live captioner with us, so if you want to access the captions, click on Live Transcript in the bottom tray. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them at the end. We welcome comments in the chat, and to start, let's find out where everyone is joining us from today and what your role in education is. Perfect. Thank you, Liz. Just a quick note, too, that we're hosting an entire week of literacy data webinars as part of our Literacy Data Takeover Week. So if you haven't already signed up for more, please do. Tomorrow, our very own Dr. Danielle D'Amico will be joining us to talk about data's role in change management. To find out about the other webinars in this series and watch recordings of past webinars, visit amplify.com/data takeover week. And just want to remind everyone that all of these webinars will be recorded. So if you can't make the live session, please come back to the registration page to get that link to watch the recording. So thank you again for joining us today. We are so excited to have Susan Lambert and Dr. Kimiana Burke on with us as they kick off this exciting new webinar series. Susan Lambert is our incredible Chief Academic Officer at Amplify, but you probably know her best as the host of Science Reading the Podcast, which is currently celebrating over 5 million downloads. Susan will be introducing today's presenter, Dr. Kimiana Burke. Hi, Susan. How are you doing today? It was so good to see you at Plain Talk last week.
Oh, it was fun to be at Plain Talk, and I'm sure many other people here, participants were at Plain Talk too, or wishing they could be. So we did miss Kimiana Burke at Plain Talk this year, but she is going to be amazing and share with you. I'm really lucky to be the one that's introducing her. And Victoria, I could talk all about the rest of Data Takeover Week because these are going to be really great sessions. But I don't want to do that because I want to leave as much time for Dr. Burke as we can. So for those of you that don't know, Dr. Kimiana Burke is a Senior Policy Fellow at Excel in Ed. And in this role, she supports states pursuing a comprehensive approach to K-3 reading policy by assisting state leaders in building new or improving existing K-3 policies with a heavy focus on supporting successful policy implementation. And we know implementation is the heart of everything. Well, Kimiana most recently served in Mississippi as the executive director for Jackson Public School District's Office of Teaching and Learning and led all aspects of the district's instructional programming. Prior to this, she was the state literacy director at the Mississippi Department of Education, where she led the implementation of Mississippi's Literacy-Based Promotion Act. My gosh, this is all a tongue twister, Kimiana. Kimiana began her career as an elementary reading teacher. She's taught middle and high school English. At Jackson State University, she earned a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science, a Master's of Arts in Teaching English, a Master of Science in Educational Administration and Supervision, and a Doctor of Education in Early Childhood Education. Kimiana Burke, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It is so great to be here. I'm so excited. I've seen all of the social media buzz and interacted with some on social media. So I'm excited to talk about Mississippi's journey. And it's just wild that we're still talking about it, right? That it's still something that's so important and that people believe that they can learn from. So I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you again. And I'm going to let you just take it away.
All right. I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. All right. Are you all able to see the screen?
Looking good.
Yep, we see it.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just elated to talk with you today and to kick off Data Week for Amplify. Why the Mississippi Miracle wasn't a miracle, and these top 3 things, the science behind it all of how to teach reading, the data that we use to reflect on, and of course, improve upon, and then the change, that implementation piece that really drives the transformational change, especially at the building level, district level, and then also the state level. So I love this slide, how it started. You know, when you look back 10 years, 11 years almost, and you say, you know, now this is where we are with our national scores, our national rankings, and then of course all of the work that has been done. It really didn't start out that way. These headlines were taken from some of our publications across the state. And when we first started, you know, trying to communicate with our stakeholders, there was just a lot of miscommunication. So I'll start off by saying that for those of you who are either in your schools or your school leaders or in your districts or in your states, communication is key. So the first step was that policy. In 2013, former Governor Phil Bryant signed our promotion policy into law called the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. Within a year, there were several legislators that felt that we should not have this type of law. And then there came this rumor that there was a halt to the law. So at the state agency, then we had to now get on the defense to say, well, no, that's not true. We're moving forward. And we had a 2-year runway before our promotion retention component went live. Our law passed 2013. 2014, 2015, the following school year was the year in which our students would take the assessment that would determine, among other things, promotion and retention. Which brings us to the assessment. During that time, Mississippi was transitioning from its curriculum test, our state assessment, which was a test based on objectives, and were very kind of broad, to Common Core. And for 1 year, and then to our new standards, which are our Mississippi College and Career Readiness Standards. In that case, we also had to then adopt an assessment that would align to those standards. So as an educator, imagine being in classrooms and teaching students to the curriculum test objectives initially. The following year, the standards went live, being put into place, and then we switched assessments. So there were a lot of things that were happening at the same time for us to begin to kind of merge into this, all of us moving in the same direction, right? So again, our standards were newly adopted, but then we also began looking at the impact of teacher preparation. With an overhaul such as this, knowing that we would have to begin from scratch with training teachers and really pushing the science of reading as a state, then we knew that we also had to look at how our educators were first being prepared, right, to become teachers. But that was going to come a little later. Although it was top of mind, we knew that we first had to address the instruction that was occurring in the classroom, because our state, like many states, would look at our systems as silos, right? There's K-12 education, and then there's higher education. But we had to really work hard in order to merge that, change that perception, and then also for educator preparation programs to begin to see themselves in K-12 student outcomes. And then, of course, there was anxiety, right? When you have a promotion retention component to your law, then it's, oh my gosh, there are going to be so many children who fail this assessment. And so one thing that we had to do was to begin to allow our work speak for us. And also we had to ensure that we were communicating with stakeholders and putting boots on the ground to show that we not only want and need kids to be reading by the end of 3rd grade, but we're going to help you get there. So how it's going, 2023. The New York Times released an article that says Mississippi is offering lessons for America on education. And I know that this was shocking to so many, not just across the country, not just the calls that we've received across the country, but also in other parts of the world, where we're looking at how we can ensure that we are creating the space for a high quality education for all students, and for this to have been done in Mississippi, which is the poorest state in the country, right? Which has about half, of its students who are Black and brown students, all of the things dealing with poverty and all of that, that we were still able to teach our children to read. And so I'm sure you've seen lately, not the Mississippi Miracle, but the Mississippi Marathon, because the work continues. Because until you have a majority of your students who are on grade level and who are able to read proficiently, then there's always still work to be done. Success is never final. So some of you may be experiencing this right now, education reform, which is what we had to do in Mississippi. We had to just reform the way in which we looked at how education was being done, practiced in our state. But then also for those who are actually doing the work, all of the different agencies, we had to think about how the system, again, would align and move. And so I love this kind of cartoon strip that says, we've all thought, I want to feel challenged, right? But not too challenged. So when they bring in this new curriculum and this new professional development and all of these things, we say, well, I want to be challenged, not too challenged, and the challenge aspect should be optional. But when we think about moving in the right direction and moving a school or moving a system, then we all have to commit to the challenge. And it can't be optional for some if we're going to move together, which was the big difference in Mississippi. This was the first time that we had our state-led approach to improving reading outcomes for all students. We do have local control like many states, and a lot of times all the things are left up to school districts to determine how they want to control their district, whether it's with curriculum assessments, all of those things, additional supports for students. So this was the first time that as a state, we were looking at moving the needle through our education reform efforts. So what were these efforts? I know we talk a lot about the Literacy-Based Promotion Act and our K-3 component of our education reform, but we also at the same time had our Early Learning Collaborative Act that passed in 2013. This was our law that was focused on 4-year-olds in Mississippi. Mississippi does not have universal pre-K. We do not have, just the open seating for our 4-year-olds. So if 4-year-olds are in a program, then it is a Title I pre-K program, or it's an early child care center or Head Start or those things. And that's how it was prior to 2013. In 2013, this was the state's first effort to fund seats in high quality programs publicly around pre-K 4-year-old education. They begin with $3 million and a few what has been called early learning collaboratives, which are partnerships with whether it's a Head Start, early child care center, and a local school district. Started with a $3 million investment from our legislature in 2013 and is now up to $20 million as an investment, and has significantly increased the opportunities for access for 4-year-olds in our state. Within these early learning collaboratives, there are literacy coaches that support the teachers. They have a high quality curriculum, and they are aligning with the science of reading as far as instruction goes, and then also with their early learning standards, with all of the things that our younger students that are developmentally appropriate for them to learn, in addition to becoming prepared and ready for kindergarten and also being ready to be a reader. So that is one of our kind of components to our Literacy-Based Promotion Act, which makes this kind of vertical alignment possible. So also that year, our LBPA passed, which focused on K-3. We also have $15 million annually that is funded through our legislature for the implementation of key components of this law. And I'll have a slide in a little bit that speaks to those. Our next slide is going to speak to that, but it speaks to all of the supports that the state education agency are to guide the implementation of on the ground. The professional development, the assessment, the coaches to support teachers, and then also infrastructure. One thing that we had to admit, our former state superintendent, Dr. Wright, knew that we did not even have offices within the department at the time to respond to some of these asks that were in the legislation. We didn't have an Office of Early Childhood. We did not have an Office of Intervention Services when we, speak so much in the law about providing intensive interventions. We did not have an office that addressed dyslexia or English learners. So all of these things were created with this shift in our infrastructure that was led by our former state chief, right? So now you have to build that in order to be able to respond to the needs of those who are on the ground. And then the last one is related to elementary education or licensure or our educator preparation programs. Our laws, the earlier laws passed in 2013, but in 2016, for the first time, we put an accountability piece in higher education. And it's the Foundations of Reading assessment, where our candidates to be licensed must pass this Science of Reading assessment to practice teaching in elementary education. So these were the things that were in policy that drove our practice. And this is just a graphic of these strategies that we use and continue to use, of course, during this time. We're, like I said, in year 10 of implementation, and some of these major components include our educator training. And all of these I'm going to speak to specifically, but our educator training at all levels, our coaching for teachers, the roles in which coaches play in classrooms, early identification of students, testing with intention, communication with our parents, individual reading plans, and of course, prevention as an prevention over retention, and retention as an intervention strategy. So today's topics will be on reading science, establishing a common language across the state. That was the one thing that was first and foremost. What does it mean to teach reading that's grounded in the science? And building educator knowledge. The next topic is around data. You have to look at your local data, state data, and national data. And how are these things similar? How are they aligned? Or are there these gaps where you're looking at it, it seems as if you're doing well in one space, but not so well in the other? And then change. And you'll see that's where a bulk of the conversation is going to take place, around change. How you set the stage for that, how you communicate that and support that shift. But then also you have to ensure that you're providing the resources, the guidance, and also communicating progress. Sometimes we're doing the work so much that we don't lift our heads up to be able to say we're actually doing some great things. We still may not be where we want to be, but we have to celebrate the progress. So what is the science of reading? We can prevent reading difficulty in children, but we have to make sure that we are identifying them early and providing them the supports much earlier than 3rd grade. States are passing what has been called Read by 3 laws, 3rd grade reading laws, but this is not just a 3rd grade teacher's responsibility. And we have to be very clear on that identification, supports, solid core tier 1 instruction all begins when students enter school, whether it's in pre-K or whether it's in kindergarten. So we have to ensure that in that K2 space as well, that those teachers are trained and are empowered and are able to identify students and provide the supports that they need in order to become skilled readers. So again, this is not just a 3rd grade teacher's responsibility, because state testing begins in 3rd grade. It's all about the preparation. So how do you establish a common language? For us, how do we support teachers in the Delta or support teachers on our coast or in East Mississippi? And we're all speaking the same language. We had to define the science of reading. And so the Reading Leaks definition of the science of reading speaks to this evidence that informs how students become proficient readers and writers, why some of those students have difficulty, and how, as educators, we can effectively teach those students, all students, differentiate the instruction in those things to ensure that we're improving student outcomes. So this came with us beginning to establish how this should look in the classroom, because it's one thing to define it, but then we also have to now put action steps to it, right? So when you think about structured literacy, I'm sure you've heard these terms and sometimes interchangeably with the science of reading. In the classroom, we should address all of the components of reading and, of course, writing, written expression, and speaking, listening, and those things. But it should also include this systematic scope and sequence, explicit instruction that is also differentiated to meet the needs of students. Now, those are a lot of words, right? They take a lot of action. But how do you do that? That is why we invested so much into building educator knowledge. Many of you know that beginning in 2013, 2014, Mississippi did adopt LETRS training, and we had LETRS training for about 9 years or so. And we trained our teachers. We began with K-3 teachers, K-8 special education teachers, elementary administrators, and then we expanded that over the years to include K-4, and then eventually any teachers who are teaching reading and any teachers who wanted to attend professional development during that time. We focused on a hybrid model of professional development where teachers learned some online and they had to pass an assessment at a certain score, but then they also had to attend professional development in person. So it was a hybrid online and in-person professional development. And usually as a cohort, they attended 2 semesters, 1 semester for the first section, and then the second semester for the second part. We also had a bridge to practice of sorts that would take place at the school during POCs. Currently, Mississippi has partnered with AIM Pathways to provide its statewide professional development to not only teachers, but also to administrators. And so this is one thing that I want to point out, is that Mississippi does have one vendor, one statewide professional development provider. And I know that there are states that have several vendors from which to choose, or they may give criteria to school districts to say, use this criteria in order to identify your professional development provider. Understand how important this is. It's extremely important because, again, you want to make sure that your teachers are learning all they need to know about how proficient reading and writing develop, and then, of course, ways in which they can ensure that they are teaching students. So this can't be a professional development that skips steps. This can't be some a professional development that includes some balanced literacy or some, whole language. That these professional development or professional learning opportunities must be vetted and aligned to your goal and to ensuring that teachers are aware of the science of reading. But we also had to build our educator knowledge of our state standards. Again, we shifted state standards during the time to our college and career readiness standards, but we also have early learning guidelines and standards. And then also your curriculum and supplemental resources. Many times we've adopted curriculum and the professional development that goes along with that curriculum may be optional. It can't be optional. Teachers have to have opportunities to learn how to implement the curriculum aside from building their knowledge about the science of reading. I want to say that again. Science of reading training is one thing to build educator knowledge. Training in how to implement and deploy a curriculum and utilize its supplemental resources is a completely different task. And teachers must be equipped with that knowledge as well in order to be effective at teaching, especially using that curriculum to teach. So I came across this slide. This is an old slide, guys. I came across this slide when I was preparing for this presentation, and I wanted to include it because so many years ago, we were looking at ways in which we were capturing kind of what we were doing from the state agency. At the state agency, and we had other offices that, again, were supporting us in ensuring that statewide our teachers and administrators had the supports that they needed. But this map, don't judge me, I was doing this from my desk and just choosing different icons. But it represents the parent meetings that were hosted across the state by our literacy coaches, or even with the state agency, our trainings that we did for literacy coaches. We have literacy coaches that are deployed from our state department, but also there were districts that wanted to hire their own literacy coaches. So we provided an ABCs of coaching training for those who were serving in coaching roles. We also had regional literacy trainings for K-3, pre-K through third grade teachers, for administrators, trainings on multi-tier system of supports. We started a campaign around Rethink Literacy for our upper elementary and secondary teachers, and then also our early childhood conference. So this is a lot of training. And these were the ways in which we were what we kind of call blasting the state to improve teacher knowledge, but also, again, to empower teachers and educate them on all things around not just teaching in the classroom, but the additional supports like MTSS and interventions that they would need. So this was not just an effort to say we're going to adopt science of reading training and that's what we'll do. These were very intentional trainings and supports that have been developed by the department and given to teachers across the state in the ways in which they can sign up online in order to attend these trainings. So again, supports for those who are on the ground. So now let's speak specifically to some of the guidance and the support that we were able to create at the department. These things have all been kind of updated. I left in 2019, so they look very, very pretty, professional now. But the objective was still the same. We developed suggested instructional routines for teaching reading. This is the screenshot for the 1st through 5th grade, but there's also one for kindergarten. And then also Parents Read at Home plan for student success. Now, I'm going to say here that as you are thinking about creating guidance or ways in which, even in your school or at your state, giving guidance and suggestions for best practices, make sure that they are directed towards the specific audience. Language that we will use for our administrators or our teachers may not be the same language that we will use for our parents and families. So you have to be very intentional about messaging and creating those resources for particular audiences. So the first thing we're going to look at is just some sample screenshots of our guidance to support the science of reading in action, an uninterrupted reading block. This is the 120-minute uninterrupted literacy block that includes writing, but this is just a sample of, again, the guidance. Now, at the state agency, because I know you keep saying, okay, she's saying guidance, right? At the state agency, we know that there are building leaders and administrators who are responsible for scheduling. We know that there are, of course, again, school boards that are responsible for adopting curricula and those things. But when it comes to best practices from our agency, we wanted to be sure to provide guidance so that so many aren't sitting at their buildings and saying, we have to come up with this alone. So we're providing a framework for guidance for best practices in ways in which you can address all of these critical components for teaching reading. And so these include the foundational skills, vocabulary instruction, suggested minutes for those things, and of course, reading comprehension through our reading standards and our speaking and listening standards, and then also writing that is connected to text, all of those within whole group, and then with small group instruction, our teacher-led small group instruction, but then also literacy center ideas. And this particular resource with our instructional routines, all of these resources can be found on the MDE's website, the Mississippi Department of Education's website. If you search literacy and go to the website and click on, they have resources for administrators, teachers, parents, and families. So these resources can be found there. But I wanted to just briefly show you how, as an agency or as an office, with the Office of Literacy, we knew that we had to begin developing guidance so that we can, again, build this common language around reading instruction. These are some samples of the pages in our Parent Read at Home plan. For example, what is phonics? And of course, there are activities for parents for each of the components of reading. But the way in which this Parent Read at Home plan should be used is that after teachers have conversations with parents around their child's possible deficit areas in which their children need to be supported, this entire Parent Read at Home plan has a definition of those particular areas, those skills, but then also what some things that parents can do at home. What are some things that they can do at home? And you probably see there's the little check boxes there that parents, as they are working with children at home, they can kind of check off, right, that I've done this activity with my child. So in addition to this Parent Read at Home plan, we do have our website that is Strong Leaders, Strong Readers, and it's geared towards parents and families, and I'll speak to that a bit later. The next part, data, or it didn't happen, right? So the critical role of data in securing lasting success. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And we have to understand that. We have to be able to look at where we are and then also determine how we want to grow professionally in our craft as educators, but then also how we want to grow our students in student outcomes. We can't say even to parents, oh, your child's doing okay. Like, what does that mean? We have to be able to quantify those things and qualify them too in many cases. Closing the honesty gap. Remember at the beginning, I spoke a little bit about looking at different types of data to see if the outcomes are aligning. Well, Mississippi, Dr. Wright would always say that we were kind of the poster child for the, closing the honesty gap, because in our state, with our old standards, our old assessment that were aligned to, it was called MCT, the Mississippi Curriculum Test, and our objectives, they weren't rigorous. And our students, it may show that our students were performing very well, that we had this high percentage of students who were proficient on our state exam. But when we would look at our national data, it will tell a completely different story, that compared to students in other states, our students were not proficient. Our students were not doing well. So how can we begin to close this honesty gap? Things that you're doing in your schools, school district data, if you're looking at your formative assessments, your universal screeners, diagnostic assessment data, your anecdotal data, but then you're looking at summative assessments and you're saying, okay, well, this child on these formative assessments, they've been doing so well. But then when they take the summative assessment, what happened, right? So we have to begin to align our assessments to the same level of rigor, but that also are focused on mastery, our standards, all of the activities that you're doing with the students or having them to complete or develop. All of those things have to be aligned to the same level of rigor for the student to be able to master the outcomes. Have you ever heard people say, or teachers say, well, I've covered it, right? Oh, these were the objectives and I've covered it. We have to make sure that children are mastering it. And so for those of you who are administrators, right, who are responsible for scheduling and all of those things, you have to be able to provide opportunities for teachers, for educators, and then also for students to be able to have that intervention time. are those times in which teachers can reteach, those times in which teachers can look at data to determine what skills students still need to strengthen, right? So all of these things go together. We all work together in this data space. And then for state and national data, Mississippi has a kindergarten readiness assessment that was passed as a part of our Literacy-Based Promotion Act and our Early Learning Collaborative Act, where our kindergarten students take a state assessment at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And with this assessment, they have to meet a goal at the beginning of the year that speaks to kindergarten readiness. And then at the end of the year, we compare the growth of those students. This assessment is also given to our pre-K students, our 4-year-old students. And we look at that data to determine if students are ready, but also the types of programs that they are attending and how well the programs are preparing students for kindergarten, whether it's Head Start, whether it's coming from home, whether it's childcare centers or public pre-K, Title I pre-K. So we're able to look at that across the board. And then we use our statewide summative assessment, and then of course our national assessment, or NAEP. And so these are some of the resources that we developed for guidance around assessment, assessing students, looking at the data. What do we do next? Universal Screener Companion Guide. This was developed because Mississippi's law states that our Mississippi Reading Panel must develop an approved list of no fewer than 4 universal screeners. And our Mississippi Reading Panel met. We have a list of 6 universal screeners that are approved for the state. School districts can choose one of 6, and the state actually reimburses school districts for the cost of these screeners through our Literacy-Based Promotion Act funds. And so that's great, right? But what do you do when you get the screening results back? And so that, again, is our role. And for those of you who are working in district offices, like your curriculum coordinators or over your offices of professional development, the process is one piece of it, or the checklist is one piece of it. The process is another. So the support and guidance that we give is going to be key. It's going to be critical. So within this document, which is again MDE's website, you start here, administer one of the state approved screeners. And again, there are 6. And then it gives you a flow chart. If below benchmark in foundational skills, these are the things that you do next. If below benchmark in language, these are the things that you do next. If at or above benchmark, these are the things that you do next, right? So this guidance, again, so that there can be some type of support as schools are making this shift and beginning this journey. And for those schools that have these literacy leaders who are already so well versed in data, they already have some processes in place. They're using data cards, they're having data meetings and all of those things. Then these things are just there to enhance that. Because again, in the school, they may already have a leader or someone who's very well versed in these processes and can then again even take them to the next level as it relates to diagnostic assessments and other supports for students. So in our state, also K-3 universal screeners must be administered 3 times per year to capture baseline data beginning of year, to do a monitor a progress check in the middle of the year, and then also at the end of the year, so that you can kind of round out that that graph, beginning, middle, and end. So parents should know about data too, right? Parents should also understand what the data say or says, depending on where you are. This effort, these campaigns around ensuring that parents understand when they receive a screening report from the school, that they know how to read that report or they know what to look for. Our law requires that students are screened, again, 3 times per year, but it also requires that these reports are sent home to parents. And you can easily check your box and say, well, I did my part. But that's not what it's about. making sure, especially from our state agency, that we were equipping and empowering parents to be able to ask some of the right questions as they engage in their schools and districts with their children's teacher. So the first one is about kindergarten. Is your kindergarten ready to learn to read? Those are the kindergarten readiness assessment scores that they should meet at the beginning of the year, 530, and at the end of the year, 681, through our kindergarten readiness assessment. This next picture, Know Your Child's Reading Score, is a very recent, within the last week, campaign that the Literacy Office just launched to ensure that parents are aware of or are able to understand their child's K-3 reading screener score. And although we do have 6 screeners that are on our list, there are about 3 of those screeners that are more widely used across the state, which would be Renaissance, iReady, and of course, an NWEA map. So it gives parents tips on being able to understand their child's reading screener score when they receive those scores at home. And then, of course, sends them to or directs them to our Strong Readers, Strong Leaders website so that parents are able to get strategies to be able to assist. Additional supports that kind of accompany the data is parental notification. As soon as students are identified as having reading deficiencies, parents must be notified according to our law. Now, we could have said that to our schools and districts and just say you have to notify parents. But what's the best approach? We have a form letter. We have a template for districts to use that is in the common language for anyone to be able to understand. And these are the things that we're going to do at the school, and these are things that we would love for you to do at home to partner with us to ensure that your child can get the support that they need to become a skilled reader. So there is a parental notification template that can be used to send home to parents. But then also, as a part of our policy, is the individual reading plan. You know, sometimes parents are being told your child is fine until the end of the school year. And then parents receive the letter to say where your child may not be promoted to the next grade. We want to make sure that that does not happen to any parent or family. We want to make sure that they are notified along the way. In the individual reading plan, which is also for teachers, to be able to document the supports that they're providing to students. Which interventions are you using? Are you seeing improved results from that? What curriculum are you using? Is it aligned to the science of reading? And if it's missing a component or not really strong in a component, then what are you supplementing that instruction with to ensure that you're meeting the needs of your students? So ways in which we can capture information, not just for documentation, not just to say I documented that, but to document the supports and the strategies that we're using. So if those are not working for that student, then we can ensure that we're doing something different, that we're meeting that student's needs. So what are the results of that? This screenshot was taken from our most recent superintendent's annual report. There's also math data and data from all of our other assessments, our 3 through 8 assessments. But the percentage of students, when we look at comparing kind of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic 2019 assessment to our most recent 2023 assessment at the state level, we had an increase of 3.4% of our 3rd grade students, and you can see the percentage for the other grades there, who increased from scoring proficient or advanced before and after the pandemic. When I think about grades 5 and grade 6, you know, even grade 7, for those students who were those students during the pandemic who were in the earlier grades, and to see that when we look at 2023, the cohort that's in 2023, to show that they are making gains in positive improvement from even those students prior to the pandemic. It just really shows the reach the reach of best practices that are being implemented across the state, and not just in our K-3 areas, but also expanding those practices to upper elementary and middle school. And now nationally, and I think this is what caused all the fuss, right? Nationally, we have been able to look at that honesty gap and begin to align our performance statewide with our performance nationally. And a part of that was because, again, we adopted more rigorous standards, but we also adopted a more rigorous assessment that was aligned to those standards and aligned to NAEP. So our 2022 NAEP fourth grade reading results, for the first time, Mississippi in 2022 scored above the national level. We scored at an average score of 217, and the nation scored at 216. We moved from 29th in 2019 to 21st in 2022. But what I think has been very notable is that our fourth grade low-income students improved from 49th in 2013 to 2nd in the nation in 2022. This piece is extremely important, and I always like to bring attention to it, is because, you know, so often we give excuses for why children don't perform as well as others. And we do know that resources are needed everywhere. Under-resourced areas, it makes it very, very challenging. So I don't want to say that it's not without challenge that our low-income students have improved. It comes with challenges. It comes with, needing resources. But when you think about all of the things that really can be barriers to success, we know that we have invested in people, and we've invested in teacher knowledge and in improving practice and looking at data and identifying those students early, and that those practices have led to an increase in student achievement, regardless of whether the child is poor or from a higher resourced neighborhood, or whether they're Black or brown. And I think that that's something that we continue to bring attention to for states or for districts or schools in areas that say, we have a lot of challenges, but you still can overcome those challenges and support students and improve their quality of life. So change is hard, but it's necessary. So how did we manage this shift? Guidance to support consistency across many districts. And then if you're looking again at state movement, it's extremely important to have some consistent guidance. So I saw this quote, your life does not get better by chance. It gets better by change. And so I put a spin on it and said that a child's reading proficiency will not get better by chance. It will get better when we decide to close the gap between what we know and what we do. And at this point, you have to set the stage. So how do you set the stage for change? For those of you who are in title, building leaders, administrators, district leaders, administrators, but then also for those of you who do not have the title, but you're a leader. You're a leader in your school, you're a leader in your district. You have to lead the charge. In leading this charge, develop a school or district literacy plan. You must have a plan. You have to know kind of where you're going, where you are now, what you want your outcomes to be, what are your goals, and what are the increments, the timeline that you're going to use to meet those goals. But you also have to build leadership and teacher capacity through professional learning. So for my leaders, when there's professional development and you send your teachers and you say, okay, I want you all to go. When are you attending professional development? You have to make the time for that, because you're the one who is going to hold that teacher or those teachers responsible or accountable for making the shift. What did you learn in professional development? Do you provide opportunities for teachers to come back and during POCs or during staff meetings, model something that they've learned from the professional development, like this is a new practice, this is something that I commit to changing in my instructional practice in the classroom. And to be able to do that, you have to know what they've learned, right? So also invest in yourselves, leaders. Make sure that you're investing in your own knowledge so that you can support teachers in your building. Also, again, create a schedule that focuses on maximizing learning, which may include utilizing support staff during the reading block. In some cases, in some schools, the uninterrupted reading block is just that, it's uninterrupted. So you're able to pull those teachers who teach, the specials, and they're able to come in and even serve kind of as monitors or those things to support just how the classroom, the procedures of the classroom, where the students are shifting from to centers, or even being able to provide that kind of support to other students who just need a little motivation or encouragement during that 90 or 120-minute reading block. And so then your schedule can also reflect that. And then communicate the roles and responsibilities. If you have support staff in your school, such as literacy coaches, interventionists, specialists, those roles and responsibilities have to be communicated, and have to be communicated to your teachers. Because if you have several people coming into your building or coming in and out of classrooms, they must be speaking the same language. They must understand the leader's goals for the school, the mission, the vision, all of those things, so that they can work together. If the coaches are working with teachers, the interventionists are working with students, or the specialists are working with students, how are they communicating? Are they sharing the same data around student improvement, around student outcomes, around student needs, right? Making sure that if you're the leader of the school, you're setting this stage, or you're shifting your culture, you have to be able to lead this charge. So the next piece is creating a coaching culture. You have to create a culture of teaching and learning. It's to the point now, even when I remember ABC came down last year, ABC News, and we visited a school, and they came in with cameras, and the students didn't even blink. They looked up and saw that people were coming in, and then they just started back, talking to their teacher and responding and those things. We've created this culture around teaching and learning to where the students understand that there are going to be other teachers coming in to learn from their teacher, or they're going to be coaches coming in to support their teachers. So the culture is not just going to be for, students understanding that other people are going to be coming in, but for teachers to begin to feel comfortable with understanding that there may be feedback to get better. And the goal is to get better for children, for their outcomes. So create a coaching culture, conduct learning walks to observe, to assess, to improve practices, and then establish a standing time for professional learning communities, which may focus on content, because sometimes we still have to build teacher knowledge, right? Whether it's in that specific content area, or preparation and planning, allowing time for teachers to plan together, especially by grade level, or content area. And then also data POCs, where we're looking at kids who are moving or not, and then asking ourselves why, or saying, what did we do to make some of these children move to this particular level? And then also, what do we need to do for these particular students? And data has a face on it. And so many times when we talk about the percentages of data, that we miss that step, that we miss that it's Kimiana who did not score or did not make any improvement within this last 6 weeks. So we have to be able to put a name to the number as it relates to data. And then communicate and support the instructional shifts. Some of this may seem repetitive, but I wanted to put it all in one place. Focus on early identification, administer that universal screener, and collect other information. Anecdotal information is also extremely important, right? The child was doing fine last week. This week, they don't seem a bit motivated, as motivated as they were last week. So some of those things, as far as anecdotal data, that's also extremely important. provide high quality tier 1 instruction during a 90 or 120-minute uninterrupted reading block. So this may impact scheduling. So make sure that you're sitting down with your schedule and being very intentional on providing that time. And provide interventions and monitor student progress. And then lastly, utilize high quality instructional materials aligned to state standards and the science of reading. You have to communicate that to your teachers, that these are the things that we're doing. These are our goals. But I also caution the runway, specifically around instructional materials and making that shift, because sometimes, and I know that sometimes with these reading laws, this has occurred. By July 1, we're going to shift to a new curriculum, and the expectation is that you'll be teaching this curriculum in August. I hope that's not happening to any of you. But sometimes there's no runway, and you have to have a runway as a district leader, as a state leader, as even a school leader, to support teachers as they are making these shifts to say, we're going to provide you training, we're going to provide support. This is when it's going to start, so that in August that you'll be ready, right? So please make sure that that is on your radar as far as supporting students. I'm sorry, as far as supporting your teachers and making that shift so that they can support students. This is a part of the theory to practice with literacy coaches. You go to professional development, you learn all the things, and then you come back to your classroom and you're like, wait, but now I have to do this with students. So literacy coaches are extremely important and really kind of critical. They were a very critical part in our implementation in Mississippi in supporting teachers as they transfer theory to practice, what they've learned in professional development to the classroom. These are the coaching model components with our coaching model, but now Mississippi also has additional coaches in mathematics. They have digital learning coaches. They also have school improvement coaches and math coaches, in addition to, of course, early childhood coaches that I mentioned earlier. So one thing that we found out is that this coaching model, being sure that instructional coaches' time is protected, that they're not serving as administrators, or they're not serving as substitute teachers when a teacher is out or a teacher is late, that they really do have the opportunity to have protected time to coach teachers, that this model actually works. This model works to support teachers, to empower teachers, and to get them to be more reflective on their own practice. And then again, the guidance and resources. Now we're in this change phase. So what does that look like? How do you implement high quality instructional materials in a science of reading classroom? So this is a resource that's developed by the Department of Education. It's called Mississippi Instructional Materials Matter, and it supports school districts in identifying the right curriculum and supporting that shift and implementing high quality instructional materials in their classrooms and schools. And then this is a kind of a screen grab of our Strong Readers, Strong Leaders website, how families can support their children to become strong readers. And then communication. Communication is key. I mentioned it before, and I'll mention it again. I always say that my first 2 years at the Department of Education was PR. We really had to convince the state, everyone involved, that this shift, this education reform that we were embarking upon, that was passed by the legislature and then delivered to the Department of Education to implement, is what's best for children. Because we were going to change practice and we were going to change all of the things for the better and support the adults while we were doing it. So with communication, our comms department at the MDE has been and still is just amazing. So communication around the third grade reading assessment, key information and dates, also regional family nights. Each year, the Department of Education, so these dates that you see here, and I know this presentation will be made available to you, but these dates that you see here are dates that Mississippi Department of Education literacy staff go to different places across the state and talk directly to families and parents around the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, the screeners, the reports that they should be looking for from their child's school, strategies that they can use at home, what resources we have available. So it's also going directly to our communities to have these conversations, not just sending emails, right? Not just hoping that they'll see it when we put things in kids' backpacks, but really going to our community and our stakeholders to discuss the practices and the strategies that we're using. And so now the return on investment. Passing a law is the first step, but implementation is key. I think the purpose of this presentation has really been to kind of demystify all the things. And we talked a lot about policy where you can check your box, and you may be in a state and you say, we have universal screeners, I can check that. You know, we have Science of Reading PD. We have all of these things that I can check the box for. But when you peel back the layers and you think about, or you really kind of look at all of the other work that has to be done to communicate this, to implement this, to develop things from scratch, right? To be able to better communicate and to begin to provide some consistency across districts, across schools for best practices, then there's definitely no miracle in that. So our strategy, again, was to originally and initially invest in people. Invest in those who are standing in front of children every day, who have to make those decisions on a dime. When a child raises his or her hand and say, I don't get it, right? Invest in people. And I love quotes or headlines. And for those of you who probably seen me present before, you know, I usually have some headlines or quotes included. But these were most recently some of the headlines that we've seen around our leap in national test scores, also talking about statewide literacy meetings and how we're speaking to parents and giving them tools and resources. And then also how other states have really just been kind of asking, okay, what is Mississippi doing? All right, thank goodness for Mississippi. And this graph shows when our LBPA was enacted, the first kind of blue circle shows 2013. And then our promotion policy went into place in 2015. And by 2019, we were tied with the nation on NAEP. But now here we are, our current literacy landscape, all students ranked 21st, our white students ranked 11th, Black and Hispanic students are both ranked 5th in the country, and our free and reduced lunch students are ranked 2nd. So what are the steps for continuous improvement? Establish communication and collaboration among your stakeholders. If you're in school districts, what are your Boys and Girls Clubs doing? If they are providing any type of tutoring or support, ensure that it's aligned to the Science of Reading. Those are questions that you can have with your community supports, the outreach in your community. Ensure safety nets are in place to support prevention of reading difficulties for students in pre-K third. Support teachers so that they're prepared to address the needs of diverse learners, including students with learning differences. Include parents and families into your literacy framework for prevention, intervention, and enrichment for students. I know we speak a lot about students who may be struggling, who need additional supports, but we have students in our classrooms who actually need more, right? They need to be motivated, they are ready to learn, and we need to be able to provide them with those opportunities so that they can advance and be provided with enrichment. And make room for what matters and subtract what overlaps or has been proven ineffective. Addition by subtraction. If you're testing a lot, you're administering all of these screeners, but they're collecting the same information. And for some screener data, you may not even be using it. It's just on a checkbox that you've been told that we have to administer it. Get rid of it. If you're not utilizing the data, streamline your processes so that you can make sure and make room for what matters. again, if you're using a screener, or if you're using not a screener, if you're using multiple screeners, because you have to use a screener. If you're using multiple and they're all collecting the same data, if you're using anything that's collecting the same data, you really have to take stock of what it is. Keep the thing that's the best tool that you utilize the most and that you can use the data to make instructional decisions for. And then make sure that you're not overlapping with your practices. Make room for what matters. And to that, I will say thank you so much for having me. Here's my contact information.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Burke, for that incredible and powerful presentation. And thank you all for staying on 5 minutes past the hour. Unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A. However, I have captured all the questions that I see we received in the Q&A, and I'll shoot those over to Dr. Burke, and she can, if you have time, you can put together some responses. And we will share links to all of the resources mentioned. I know there were a lot of questions about sharing those links. So look out for a post-event email coming with all of that, including the link to the recording and your certificate of attendance. Thank you all again for joining today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye all.